Hello there and welcome back to some more Forza Top Gear laps. Today we are taking a look at some Australasian cars as we continue our trip around the globe. We begin with the 2015 Subaru WRX STI, 305 horsepower, 290 foot-pound torque, 3,386 pounds of weight. The final WRX STI. Up until this point, it has to be said, although considering it's been killed off in the UK and Subaru's plans for the WRX don't necessarily seem to be set in concrete, I don't know if we're going to be seeing one anytime soon, especially considering the WRX STI has sort of stopped its rallying days, although it does still get used in manufacturer rallying, kind of. I do like the 2015 Subaru WRX, I think it looks absolutely great. Of course, I love Subarus. I mean, this used to be the Impreza WRX, I still kind of call it that occasionally. But you know, I mean, it's a Boxer 4 engine, which you can't not love. It's got a big wing, it's blue, how can you not like it? Of course, the WRX has sort of been rendered slightly obsolete by some hot hatches, I guess, in the last few years, although no hot hatch is quite as interesting or so on as the Subaru is. As far as it goes to drive, it is actually slightly sharper than most of the Impreza WRXs that we've driven around here. Usually Imprezas are great cars, they're a little bit understeer, can be slightly soft on the suspension, but for the most part they are excellent platforms and just generally good cars to start with. And this one, probably the best handling of all the WRXs, it has to be said. And next up, another Subaru, the 2008 Subaru Impreza WRX STI Hatchback. 305 horsepower, 335 foot-pound torque, 3,395 pounds of weight. Not too sure on that torque figure, I don't know if that's legit or not. I will say every other Impreza in this game is hovering around 300 foot-pounds, so I don't know if that's a mistake with the game or genuinely in Japan if there was just one version of the Impreza that was launched with 30 more torque than any Impreza before or since. The Impreza hatchback. For me, this is where the Impreza started to go a little bit wrong because they had the major restyling this time round. The first generation, second generation, generally well received. Third generation is when they focused more on the hatchback design, which people weren't so comfortable with. It does have to be said, it looks nowhere near as good as the Hawkeye, Blob Eye, Bug Eye, and Peanut Eye. But this is what they decided to go with. And this is, this sort of when the Impreza started to fall off a cliff. Also, the interior in these, I can speak from experience, is very, very poor. As far as it goes to drive in the game, it is typical WRX-like. Again, understeer, a little bit of suspension lean, but overall pretty good. It does feel a little bit more so with this car though. This, I'm not just saying this because it's my least favourite Impreza. For me personally, this feels like the worst handling of all the Imprezas. It's still an excellent car out the box, don't get me wrong, but there's something not quite as sharp in this car as there is in the other WRXs. And finally, this is the final Subaru for today, the 1996 Subaru SVX, 230 horsepower, 228 foot-pound torque, 3,580 pounds of weight. From Subaru's sort of downfall to Subaru being weird. The SVX was launched in 1991, I believe. And essentially what this car was Subaru's answer to a luxury coupe from Subaru, who at the time were known mostly for making farm machinery. This car came before the days of the Impreza, the legacy. This was sort of the car that was supposed to kickstart the new Subaru, if you will. Bit of a strange vehicle, a 6-cylinder Boxer engine, 4-speed automatic transmission only, which was sort of one of the big issues with these cars, and a price tag of, I think it was the equivalent of about $50,000 in the United States, which was about what you could buy a BMW 6 Series for, so it didn't sell very well. But still, it is a very unique looking car, sort of part S13 Sylvia, part New Legacy, at the time New Legacy, the original Legacy I should say. Very interesting, strange vehicle this one. As far as it goes to drive, it is a good handling car, don't get me wrong, very good handling car. The gearbox is naff, it has to be said. This is sort of the big crux of this car in real life and indeed in game as well. 4-speed automatic, not quite good enough. The engine itself's pretty okay. I can imagine with a decent manual box or even a better automatic, this would be a little bit more advanced on it. And again, it just resembles a great platform to start building a car on if you so wish to. Next up, 2003, a Nissan 350Z, 287 horsepower, 273 foot-pound torque, 3,310 pounds of weight. The Nissan 350Z. This is a bit of an interesting car. I haven't had a good history with 350Zs, as people will know. I've sort of bash this car a little bit. I do have to say slightly unfairly, it does have to be said, it's not a boring sports car. I've been in one since and I can confirm it wasn't really boring. I'm still not a massive fan of the 350, I do think the looks are a little bit bloated. I'm not a fan of the engine and it is cheap, to say the least, but no, you know, I do have a little bit more respect for these cars. The Infiniti G35 will be what I bash for future reference, but yeah, no, I'm still not a massive fan of the 350, but I do have to concede it is a better car than I thought it was. Sorry. Anyways, as far as it goes to driving game, well, it's pretty much as you'd expect the 350Z to be. It's an alright handling car, pretty well balanced, you know, roughly, I don't know if this is 50-50 weight distribution, but it's probably not far off. The thing you do notice, it is a little bit heavy. This is an issue with this car in real life as well. The 350Z isn't a lightweight sports car, and you can feel this. It does feel a little bit confused as to whether it wants to be a GT car or a sports car. But yeah, as long as you pay attention to that weight though, it's pretty decent to drive. Next up, 2015 Infiniti Q60 Concept, 400 horsepower, 400 foot-pound torque, 3,650 pounds of weight. This is the most powerful car here today, the torquiest car here today, and the heaviest car here today. Of course, the Infiniti Q60 has since become an actual car, although I think it might have been cancelled recently. Anyways, the Infiniti Q60 did eventually become a car, and it did have 400 horsepower as well, but this was when it was a concept car, because Forza still has some of these weird concept cars hanging around. The Infiniti also technically, yes, I think Forza counts this as American, although it is owned by Nissan. That's why it's here. And these things probably get sold as Skylines in Japan, as have previous sold G35s, G37s. The Q50 is sold as the Skyline sedan. It won't surprise me if the Q60 is also sold as a Skyline. As far as this goes to drive, it is a solid, good, front-engine, rear-wheel drive sports car. This actually did impress me a fair bit, because this car is surprisingly good. It's pretty sharp, good handling thing. Yeah, I really don't have many complaints about this. As far as interesting alternatives to something like, say, a BMW 6 Series or a Mercedes C63, this could be it. It actually is not that bad a car to drive. I was pleasantly surprised by the Infiniti Q60 Concept, I do have to say. Next up on one Australian car, hence Australasian cars, the 1974 Holden Sandman panel van, 240 horsepower, 315 foot-pound torque, 3,280 pounds of weight. The good old Holden Sandman, the shagging wagon for those of you in Australia. This is essentially a Holden, I don't think it was called the Monaro, it was called something else, although I think it was like the Kingsman or something like that. It's a Holden Kingsman, but it's a ute, but this version is the ute, but a panel van, because it has the bit put over the bed cover. Makes sense? Good. You can turn this thing back into a ute if you wish so, through the customization, but as it comes stock out of the box, it is the panel van. I love the Holden Sandman. It's just, you know, it's a ute with a bed on the back that kind of makes it look like an old Austin Maestro van. It comes in a bunch of silly colours. It's probably my favourite of the Australian cars in this game, other than HSV GTSR, which is the best car ever made. But other than that, yeah, no, this is a pretty cool car. As far as it goes to drive, it is decent. It is predictably slow, to say the least. I mean, especially after driving that Infiniti around. This does feel a little bit out of its depth, but it is a pretty good car. The Monaro itself isn't really that much to write home about, but the Sandman is a lot more interesting and out to. I mean, you know, you've got to race a Holden Sandman. I mean, look at it. I guess the closest thing to this car in game's the El Camino. The El Camino is quicker, but it isn't quite as cool. Next up, the 2013 Hyundai Veloster Turbo, 201 horsepower, 195 foot-pound torque, 2,767 pounds of weight as the Xbox mysteriously turns on. This is the lightest car here today. The original Hyundai Veloster. This is an interesting looking vehicle, to say the least. The Veloster is also pretty interesting because we've actually had the newer versions of this car already go around the track. We've had the 2019 Turbo and Veloster N go around before, and I don't really remember too much about them, so they must have not been particularly interesting, but there you go. Yeah, no, the Veloster, controversial looking car to say the least. This is of course famous for having two doors on one side and one door on the other side, which I don't really get. They should have really committed one way or the other, but hey, that's why some people like this thing, I guess. The Veloster actually does do reasonably well. We don't get it in the UK anymore, instead we get the i30N, which is Well, I wanted a Golf R, but I'm a tight ass, but by the by, yeah, Veloster. As far as this thing goes to drive, it is okay. It is solid to drive. It's fine. The problem this vehicle has is it does have a poor differential. That has to be said. The front wheel does like to go a little bit sort of off on its own accord, so to speak, which is not particularly great. I would stick to a newer version of this car, probably the N, because I do actually, now I'm thinking about it, the N actually was a pretty decent handling car, so go for the Veloster N over this. And finally today, yes, technically it's American, but it isn't technically American. The 2002 Acura RSX Type-S, 200 horsepower, 142 foot-pound torque, 2,820 pounds of weight. This is the least powerful car here today by 1 horsepower, and also the least torquey car, because it's a Honda. Yes, the RSX, I like this car a lot. I remember lusting after these things in Gran Turismo 3 A-Spec, back when that game had the concept car to the RSX, I believe. Yes, no, of course, as we know it in Europe and Japan, this is a Honda Integra. But the Americans got it as an RSX, or an Acura, which they stapled some leather seats to it, forgot the Type R existed, put a K20 in it and said, here you go. And that's why I like it a lot, because I'm a big fan of luxurious Hondas, as should be immediately apparent. Yeah, no, the RSX, I like this thing a lot. I would probably have an RSX if I could, but I can't because I live in the UK, so I'm kind of sad about that. As far as this goes to drive, well, it has got a poor differential. That has got to be said about it, once again, like the Veloster. I don't think it's quite as bad as the Veloster on account of it not having quite as much torque as the Veloster. But it is still there. It is a pretty decent car to drive, though. I mean, you know, you stick a race differential in this, put some different tyres on it and boost it up a bit. It probably is quite a capable front-wheel drive car. It certainly has the makings of being a good front-wheel drive car, of course, as we always know. Front-wheel drive Hondas are usually pretty good bets, but there are better choices, it has to be said. Onto the leaderboards then, and the fastest car today was the Infiniti Q60 Concept, going into 157th place with 121.670. It is actually quicker than a BMW M6 Coupe, a Lotus Evora, Lamborghini Urus concept car, the other concept car in this game. Yeah, really a pretty darn good time from the Infiniti, it does have to be said. In 253rd place, we find the Subaru WRX STI with 124.859, the quickest of all of the stock WRX STIs we've tested. Obviously quicker than the Blob Eye, quicker than all the Evos as well, so a nice final resting place for the WRX down there. Next up, in 258th place, we find the Nissan 350Z with a 125.859, not all that much to compare it to, but it is slightly quicker than a Mustang Cobra, Quattro, so not too bad a time, as we said. In 264th place, we find the Impreza Hatchback with 125.937, goes very slightly quicker than a Subaru Legacy B4 Evo 8. The WRX STI sedan, it's actually quicker than the sedan version of it, but I would still much rather have the sedan, I've got to be honest. In 392nd place, we find the Subaru SVX with 130.769, goes in between a Lotus 11 and an Aston Martin DB5, which I'm almost 100% certain a Subaru SVX has never been seen in between those cars ever in its life. Still not a bad time considering the crap gearbox. Moving down once again, in 401st place, we find the Hyundai Veloster Turbo with a 131.006, goes in between a Mitsubishi Eclipse and a BMW 323 Ti, and also the Holden Monaro is actually not that far off, which is the Sandman's donor car. Yeah, the Veloster's not too bad, although the newer versions are much quicker. In 412th place, we find the Acura RSX Type-S with 131.480, which is actually pretty good, beats out a Pontiac Firebird and a Holden Tirana, Eagle Talon as well, actually, come to think of it. In 417th place, our final car of today, the Holden Sandman panel van goes in there with a 131.945, slightly beats out a Mustang GT from 1965, which is pretty interesting, has to be said, although it is about 2 seconds off of the Chevrolet Chevelle, but still, I would rather have the Sandman, and then you have more PI to play with, to speak, and so on. Anyways, thank you all very much for watching this edition of Forza Top Gear Labs. Do hope you've enjoyed. Next time on the main episode, we're going to be taking a look at some more German cars, so be prepared for minute engineering and unreliability, and then join us for the next Rivals episode, which is going to come up before that, which is going to be Aussie versus American muscle racers. So join us for that. Until then, farewell.
You know the fear, the sorrow that my heart holds in knowing just where my hopes and dreams are going. I'll only you bear. you are not part of. I sung this letter to your father with love.